7 cities, 0 robotaxis. Tesla just broke its own promise and buried the real reason in the fine print. The robotaxi retreat nobody wanted to admit. At the start of the year, Tesla drew a map. Phoenix, Miami, Orlando, Tampa, Las Vegas, all lined up next to Austin, all promised robotaxi service within the first half of the year. That deadline has now come and gone, and the language on Tesla's own materials tells the real story. What used to be a firm launching this half has quietly turned into preparations are underway. The corporate equivalent of admitting nothing is actually launching anytime soon. Only Las Vegas looks close to real. Gold-wrapped robotaxi test cars have been spotted around the city, and Tesla has filed a permit to eventually run up to 5,000 of them across Clark County. That's a filing, not a fleet, but it's more progress than the other 5 cities combined. Meanwhile, in Austin, the city where this whole experiment supposedly proved itself, the numbers are still tiny. Roughly 20 cars are operating in what Tesla calls its unsupervised zone, and most of those rides still have a Tesla employee's passenger seats as a safety monitor. So even the flagship city isn't running unsupervised in the way people assume when they hear the word robotaxi. Why the rollout actually stalled the bottleneck isn't hype, it isn't demand, and it isn't regulation this time, it's software. Tesla has said publicly that it's waiting on full self-driving version 15 before scaling this service into new markets, and version 15 isn't a small patch. Reports point to it being roughly 10 times larger than the current model, jumping from around 1 billion parameters to somewhere near 10 billion. That's not an update, that's essentially a full rebuild of the brain driving the car. A model that much bigger doesn't run on old hardware. It needs a serious jump in onboard computing power, which is exactly why so much attention has shifted to Tesla's next-generation self-driving chip, AI5. That chip is supposed to enter production later this year and ramp up through next year, which sounds promising, until you remember that Tesla's own chip and software timelines have slipped before more than once, and usually by a lot. Here's the part that actually matters for anyone watching closely. The current chip, AI4, is still what's running the newest version of FSD in real customer cars today. If AI5 gets delayed the way past hardware transitions have, Tesla may need AI4 to keep carrying the software for longer than originally planned. That's not necessarily a disaster. It just means the 7-city robotaxi summer was always more of a marketing timeline than an engineering one. The bigger pattern: robotaxis are hard for everyone, not just Tesla. If this were only a Tesla problem, it would be easy to write off as one company overpromising again. But look at what's happening across the entire robotaxi industry right now, and a different picture appears. Waymo, widely seen as the most mature, most cautious operator in this space, just had to recall nearly 4,000 vehicles, not for a minor glitch, but because its cars were driving directly into active highway construction zones. In one stretch of the San Francisco Bay Area alone, 7 separate Waymo vehicles entered coned-off lanes where road crews were actively working. The system was tuned to watch for other hazards, and simply wasn't reliably recognizing construction zones as one of them. Waymo responded the way a mature safety program should. They identified the cause, filed a formal recall with federal regulators, paused freeway and highway service company-wide, and pulled operations back to surface streets only while they fix it. That's the correct playbook. But it's also proof that even the operator with the most miles, the most sensors, and the most cautious reputation in the industry is still finding blind spots it hasn't solved. Then there's Amazon's Zoox, which just unveiled its production intent robotaxi. Essentially the final design it plans to manufacture at scale. No steering wheel, no pedals, boxy shape, passengers seated facing each other like a small shuttle rather than a car. Zoox says its California plant can build up to 100 of these a week, which scales to roughly 10,000 a year at full output. Having Amazon's balance sheet behind this matters enormously, because this industry has already buried multiple self-driving startups that ran out of cash before their technology was ready. Zoox still needs a federal exemption to legally sell a vehicle with no human controls at all. The same regulatory wall nearly every fully driverless design eventually runs into. So the honest picture right now is 3 different companies, 3 different approaches, and 3 different sets of problems. Tesla is scaling slower than promised because its software isn't ready. Waymo is the most experienced operator on the road, and still just recalled thousands of cars over a construction zone blind spot. Zoox has real manufacturing numbers on paper, but still needs regulators to sign off before it can remove the steering wheel entirely. What this actually means, none of this means autonomous driving is failing. It means the industry is colliding with the gap between demo-stage software and real-world deployment at scale. and every serious player is hitting that wall in a slightly different place. Tesla's wall is compute and model size. Waymo's wall is edge case recognition. Zoox's wall is regulatory approval for a vehicle with no human backup. The direction for all three companies is still forward. But the city-by-city map Tesla drew for itself this year was always a Tesla-authored deadline, and Tesla-authored deadlines have a long history of slipping. The bigger nationwide expansion is genuinely tied to version 15 landing, and there's no real reason it should also be gated behind AI5 shipping on schedule, since AI4 is still capable of running today's software. Whether that ends up mattering is one of the more interesting threads to watch play out over the rest of this year. The part people keep missing: there's a tendency to treat every delay like this as a red flag, proof that the whole Robotaxi concept is somehow overhyped or years away from working. But that framing misses what's actually happening under the hood. A tenfold jump in model size isn't a cosmetic change, it's the difference between a system trained to handle common driving situations and one that starts approaching the kind of general reasoning needed to handle the genuinely rare, weird, unscripted moments that make up real-world driving. Rushing that kind of leap onto hardware that can't support it would be the actual mistake here, not the decision to wait. It's also worth remembering how young this entire category still is. Waymo has been at this for over a decade and is only now running into construction zone blind spots at scale. Tesla's approach, cameras only, no LiDAR, trained on a fleet of millions of consumer vehicles feeding data back constantly, is a fundamentally different bet than Waymo's sensor-heavy, geofenced approach, and different bets hit different walls at different times. Zoox is betting that a purpose-built vehicle with no steering wheel at all is worth the years of regulatory friction that decision guarantees. None of these three approaches has been proven wrong yet. They've just each hit the specific obstacle their own strategy was always going to run into eventually. That's really the story underneath all of this news. It's not that Robotaxi failed to show up this year. It's that the timeline for making software this safe, at this scale, was compressed into a marketing calendar that never should have been treated as an engineering deadline in the first place. Whether Las Vegas becomes the actual proof-of-concept city instead of Austin, whether FSD V15 ships on anything resembling its original timeline, whether AI5 production genuinely starts on schedule, or slips again, whether Waymo's construction zone fix rolls out before or after its highway service resumes, whether Zoox secures its federal exemption before Tesla or Waymo do. The 7-city Robotaxi promise was never really a broken promise. It was a timeline that assumed software and silicon would move faster than they actually can. Tesla isn't alone in learning that lesson this year. Waymo just relearned it with a recall. Zoox is still waiting on regulators to let it prove its point at all. The race to remove the driver isn't slowing down. It's just running into the part of the process that hype timelines never account for. The part where the software actually has to work everywhere, every time, before anyone gets to call it finished. If you want to keep tracking which of these Robotaxi bets actually holds up first, follow along. This story is moving fast, and the next few months should make it obvious who's really ahead.